Daniel Harper was laughing. It was the kind of laugh that came easily, the kind that made him look younger than his 38 years. He leaned back in his chair at the rooftop restaurant, the city lights glowing behind him like a celebration meant only for him. Across the table sat Chloe, his girlfriend, her fingers wrapped around a glass of sparkling water, her eyes fixed on him as if he were the most fascinating man in the world. The evening felt perfect. Soft music played in the background. The sky above them was deep blue, slowly turning black. A warm breeze moved gently across the rooftop, carrying the smell of expensive food and fresh flowers. Daniel had chosen this place carefully. He liked places that made him feel powerful, successful, in control. Chloe laughed at something he said and reached across the table to touch his hand. "You seem happier these days," she said softly. Daniel smiled again. "I am," he replied without hesitation. And in that moment, he believed it. For months, he had convinced himself that this was what happiness looked like. No arguments. No silent dinners. No cold stares from across the bedroom. Just excitement. Admiration. Attention. His phone buzzed on the table, but he ignored it. Tonight was about him. A waiter approached, but instead of holding a tray of desserts, he looked slightly uncertain. "Mr. Harper?" the waiter asked politely. Daniel nodded. "Yes. There is a courier downstairs asking for you. He says it is urgent. He requires your signature." Daniel frowned slightly. "Now?" "Yes, sir. He said it cannot wait." Chloe tilted her head. "That's strange." Daniel gave a small chuckle. "Probably business. It never stops." He stood up smoothly, adjusting his jacket. "I'll be back in a minute." He took the elevator down to the lobby, mildly annoyed but not worried. Business documents arrived at all hours. Contracts. Agreements. New opportunities. His life was built on paperwork. In the lobby, a man in a grey uniform stood near the entrance holding a large brown envelope. "Daniel Harper," the courier confirmed. "Yes. Please sign here." Daniel signed casually, barely glancing at the sender's name. He slipped the pen back and took the envelope. It felt heavier than normal, thick with papers. "Have a good evening," the courier said before walking away. Daniel walked toward the glass doors, intending to go back upstairs before opening it. But something made him stop. Maybe it was the word legal printed in the corner. He tore the envelope open right there in the lobby. The first page slid out. He looked down. And froze. Petition for dissolution of marriage. His heart skipped. He read the name below it slowly. Filed by Olivia Harper, his wife. For a moment, the world seemed to go silent. The sound of traffic outside disappeared. The voices in the lobby faded. All he could hear was the sudden pounding of his own heartbeat. Divorce papers. Olivia had filed for divorce. Not a warning. Not a threat. Not another emotional conversation. This was real. Official. Signed by her. His hands tightened around the pages as he flipped through them quickly. Property division. Financial disclosures. A request for immediate separation of assets. Even a note requesting that all further communication be handled through her lawyer. Lawyer. She had already hired a lawyer. Daniel felt something cold spread through his chest. She wasn't begging. She wasn't fighting. She was leaving. Upstairs, Chloe waited, probably checking her reflection in her phone, expecting him to return with his confident smile. Daniel stared at the final page. There it was. Olivia's signature. Calm. Steady. Certain. His smile was gone now. Completely gone. He suddenly felt exposed, like the ground beneath him had shifted without warning. After a long moment, he forced himself to move. He folded the papers carefully and placed them back inside the envelope, but his fingers were no longer steady. When he returned to the rooftop, Chloe immediately noticed the change. "You look pale," she said, standing up slightly. "Daniel, what happened?" He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, holding the envelope in his hand, staring at nothing. The music still played. The city lights still shimmered. Everything looked the same. But nothing felt the same. Chloe stepped closer. Daniel, you're scaring me. What is it? He finally looked at her. And for the first time that night, there was no confidence in his eyes. My wife, he said quietly, his voice almost unfamiliar to himself. She sent divorce papers. The words hung between them. Heavy. Unavoidable. And in that perfect rooftop setting, surrounded by lights and laughter, Daniel Harper felt the first crack in the life he thought he controlled. Olivia Harper was not always just his wife. Years ago, she had been the reason Daniel believed in love. They met at a small charity event organized by a mutual friend. Daniel had just started building his business, full of ambition and restless energy. Olivia worked as a marketing assistant at a publishing company. She was simple, warm, and carried a quiet confidence that did not need attention to shine. That night, while others tried to impress Daniel with business ideas and loud conversations, Olivia spoke to him about books, travel dreams, and the kind of life she wanted to build, one filled with meaning, not just money. Daniel was drawn to her calm nature. She made him feel grounded. With her, he did not have to compete. He did not have to prove himself. Their relationship moved quickly. Long evening walks turned into weekend trips. Weekend trips turned into shared apartments. Within 2 years, they were married in a small garden ceremony surrounded by family and close friends. Daniel remembered how Olivia looked that day, her eyes bright with trust, her hand steady in his. In the early years, they were happy. They cooked together in their small kitchen. They laughed at silly television shows. They stayed up late planning their future. Olivia believed in him when his company struggled. She encouraged him when deals failed. She told him he was capable of greatness long before the world noticed him. And when success finally came, she celebrated him as if it were her own victory. But success changed Daniel slowly. At first, it was just longer working hours. Important meetings. Business dinners. Late-night calls. Olivia understood. She supported him. She waited patiently at home, sometimes falling asleep on the couch while waiting for him to return. Then came the missed anniversaries. The forgotten promises. The empty chair at family gatherings. Daniel told himself he was doing it for them, for their future, for financial security, for a better life. But with every promotion, with every new contract signed, he seemed to move further away from the woman who had stood beside him at the beginning. Olivia began to notice the distance. Their conversations became shorter. His replies became distracted. Even when he was physically present, his mind was somewhere else, checking emails, answering messages, thinking about the next opportunity. She tried to save what was slipping away. She suggested weekend trips. He said he was too busy. She planned quiet dinners at home. He arrived late. She tried talking to him about how lonely she felt. He brushed it off. "You're overthinking," he would say. "Everything is fine." But everything was not fine. Olivia did not want luxury. She wanted attention. She wanted partnership. She wanted the man who once looked at her as if she were his entire world. Instead, she got silence. Daniel slowly stopped noticing the small things she did, the way she still prepared his favorite meals, the way she ironed his shirts before important meetings, the way she waited up for him no matter how late it was. He stopped thanking her. He stopped asking about her day. He stopped seeing her. And without realizing it, Daniel began losing the very woman who had once believed in him more than anyone else. Chloe entered Daniel's life at a time when he was already drifting away from his marriage. She was younger, confident, and full of energy. They met at a corporate networking event hosted by one of Daniel's business partners. Chloe worked as a consultant for a luxury branding company. She was ambitious, stylish, and knew exactly how to hold someone's attention. That night, she approached Daniel first. "I've heard a lot about you," she said with a charming smile. "You're the man everyone wants to work with." Daniel felt something he had not felt in a long time, admiration without expectation. Chloe looked at him as if he were impressive, powerful, unstoppable. Their conversation flowed easily. She laughed at his jokes. She listened carefully when he spoke about his business. She complimented his ideas. There was no talk about emotions, No discussions about loneliness or distance. Just lightness. Excitement. After the event, she sent him a message about a possible collaboration. It was professional at first. Meetings during the day. Coffee discussions about marketing strategies. Harmless. At least that was what Daniel told himself. But the meetings became longer. The conversations became more personal. She began asking about his life outside work. "Are you happy?" she once asked casually over coffee. The question stayed with him. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he said something safe. "Marriage is complicated." Chloe tilted her head sympathetically. "You deserve to be happy too, you know." Those words felt dangerous. And comforting. For the first time in years, Daniel felt noticed. Not as a provider, not as a husband, not as a responsibility, but as a man. The emotional distance between him and Olivia had already created a space. Chloe simply stepped into it. Soon, he started coming home later than usual. At first, he blamed work. Important client dinner. Unexpected meeting. Traffic was terrible. Olivia listened quietly. She wanted to believe him. But she noticed the change. He smelled different sometimes. He guarded his phone more carefully. He smiled at messages he did not share. Daniel began lying with more confidence. The guilt was there in the beginning. A small voice inside him whispered that he was crossing a line. But he ignored it. He convinced himself that nothing serious had happened yet. It was just friendship. Just conversation. But emotional betrayal slowly turned into physical betrayal. The first time he held Chloe's hand, he told himself it meant nothing. The first time he kissed her, he told himself his marriage was already broken. The first night he did not come home at all, he stopped explaining. At home, Olivia's questions became softer, not louder. "Are you okay?" she would ask. "Yes," he would answer quickly. "You seem far away." "I'm just tired." Instead of facing the pain in her eyes, Daniel chose the excitement in Chloe's. With Chloe, there were no responsibilities. No history. No expectations of loyalty built over years. Just passion. Attention. Escape. He began emotionally disconnecting completely from his marriage. He stopped trying to fix anything. He stopped caring about arguments. In his mind, he had already stepped out. He justified his actions carefully. "Olivia doesn't understand me anymore. We've grown apart. I deserve to feel alive again. I deserve happiness." He repeated those thoughts until they sounded like truth. But deep inside, he knew he was choosing temporary excitement over lasting commitment. Still, he continued. Because it was easier to chase something new than repair something broken. And every time he walked through his front door late at night, avoiding Olivia's eyes, he moved one step closer to the moment when everything would finally collapse. That night, after leaving the restaurant early, Daniel sat alone in his car with the envelope resting on the passenger seat. He stared at it for a long time before opening it again. This time, he forced himself to read every page carefully. Each sentence felt sharp. Cold. Official. Olivia was not reacting emotionally. She was prepared. The documents clearly listed their properties, bank accounts, investments, and shared assets. She had requested a fair but firm division. There was no anger in the wording. No dramatic accusations. Just clarity. She had already moved out of their house. She had already transferred her personal belongings. She had requested that all future communication go through her attorney. Daniel's chest tightened as he reached the final pages. Everything was organized. Every detail carefully planned. Even the timeline showed she had been preparing this for weeks. Weeks. While he had been smiling with Chloe, Olivia had been meeting lawyers. While he was lying about late meetings, she had been quietly building her exit. She wasn't confused. She wasn't begging. She was done. Daniel pulled out his phone and immediately called her. It rang once. Twice. Then went to voicemail. He ended the call and tried again. Voicemail. He sent a message. "We need to talk." No reply. He felt something unfamiliar rising inside him. Fear. Not the fear of losing money. Not the fear of public embarrassment, but the fear of losing someone who had once loved him without conditions. He drove to the house instinctively, but when he arrived, the lights were off. The place looked empty, quiet. The windows dark and still. Inside, the rooms felt larger than before. Colder. Her favorite chair near the window was gone. The framed pictures on the hallway wall were missing. Her presence had disappeared completely. Daniel stood in the silence and, for the first time, allowed himself to feel the weight of what he had done. He had assumed she would fight. He had assumed she would cry. He had assumed she would wait. But Olivia had chosen dignity instead. The next day, Chloe noticed his mood immediately. "You've been quiet," she said while sitting across from him in his apartment. "It's just stress," he replied. "About the divorce." He looked at her sharply. "How do you know?" "You told me last night," she said gently. "You looked shaken." He didn't respond. Chloe shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't expect it to happen this fast." Daniel noticed the distance in her tone. It was subtle, but it was there. She had enjoyed being with a married man who seemed powerful and in control. But now there were lawyers involved. Legal battles. Complications. This was no longer exciting. It was messy. Over the next few days, Chloe became busier. She cancelled dinners. Replied to messages late. Her warmth cooled slightly. Daniel began to see something clearly. Chloe was drawn to the confident version of him, the man who had everything under control. Not the man sitting in front of divorce papers. Not the man losing his marriage. Not the man facing consequences. He sat alone one evening, the document spread across his desk. He read Olivia's name again. Her signature. Strong and steady. And suddenly, the reality became unavoidable. He might lose his home. He might lose half of his wealth. He might lose his reputation. But worst of all, he had already lost the one person who had loved him long before success, before money, before anyone else cared. And for the first time, Daniel Harper understood that the price of his choices was far greater than he had ever imagined. A week later, Daniel finally received a message. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't angry. It was simple. "We can meet tomorrow at 4 p.m. My lawyer's office." Olivia. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early. The waiting room felt too quiet, too formal. The walls were plain, the air cold. This was not the warm home they once shared. This was business. When Olivia walked in, he almost didn't recognize her. She looked the same, and yet completely different. She wore a simple cream-colored suit. Her hair was neatly tied back. There were no tears in her eyes. No visible pain. Only calm strength. "Hello, Daniel," she said politely. Her voice was steady. He stood up slowly. "Olivia." For a moment, neither of them spoke. He searched her face for anger, for sadness, for some sign that she was still emotionally connected. But she looked composed. Peaceful even. They sat across from each other at a long table. "I didn't think you would actually file," he said quietly. She looked at him directly. "You didn't think I would leave." It wasn't a question. It was truth. Daniel swallowed. "We could have talked. We could have fixed this." Olivia's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "I tried to talk, Daniel. 4 years." The words hit him harder than any accusation. "I was busy," he said weakly. "You were absent," she corrected gently. Silence filled the room. Daniel felt the weight of regret pressing down on him. "I'm sorry," he finally said. And this time, he meant it. "I should have listened. I should have seen what I was losing." Olivia studied him carefully. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you," she said quietly. "I left because I started loving myself." Those words changed everything. She continued, "I waited for you to choose me. Again and again. But you stopped choosing this marriage long before I filed those papers." Daniel lowered his eyes. He thought about the late nights. The lies. The excuses. The way he had convinced himself he deserved more, without realizing he already had enough. "I made a mistake," he admitted. "Yes, Olivia said calmly. You did. There was no anger in her voice. And somehow, that hurt even more. The lawyer entered the room briefly, placing the final documents in front of them. Olivia signed first. Her hand did not shake. When it was Daniel's turn, he hesitated only for a second. Then he signed. With that simple movement, years of memories became history. As they stood to leave, Daniel looked at her one last time. Will you ever forgive me? Olivia gave him a small, sad smile. Forgiveness isn't the problem. Trust is. She walked away without looking back. Daniel remained standing there, alone in the quiet office, holding the weight of his choices. He had smiled with someone else. He had chased excitement. And in doing so, he had lost the only woman who had loved him when he had nothing. Because betrayal does not destroy love in a single moment, it slowly replaces it with regret. And sometimes, by the time a man understands the value of loyalty, he is left with nothing but silence.